All right, guys, so I have been looking forward to this review for a very long time, ever since I saw the media samples coming out for Jack Daniel's 12-year, and I believe the 10-year batch number 2 samples came with it. I was watching all my friends making review videos for this thing, very few dissenting opinions on the 12-year, and the fact that they cranked the proof up on this over the 10-year, I just thought there's no way that this could go wrong, and I heard so many great things. The secondary price was through the roof. I just didn't think that was gonna be the time to pick one of these things up. But fast forward to a few weeks ago at Pours in the Park, I had the opportunity at the bottle share to try the Jack Daniel's 12-year, and I was well into my evening of drinking. That's probably the most polite way of saying that I was a little sloshed. But I remember pouring this thing, tasting it, sensory overload in the room. It was super loud, and this thing cut right through all the noise, literally and figuratively. And I was like, holy crap, that reminds me of King of Kentucky. I've gotta go home. I've gotta find this. So I ended up paying, yes, $250. It is expensive on secondary, but it's not like the several $100s more that was being asked of it when this initially released. So I felt a little more comfortable about it. Whatever you think about the secondary market, that's not what we're talking about in this video, at least not yet. And because I said, at that moment that I tried it for the first time, that it had some resemblance to the King of Kentucky, I decided let's pull out this 2021, which is one of my most prized bottles. Got a little pour already out, waiting for the comparison at the end of this video. So stick around, we are gonna do that, but first, let's check out this 12-year. It's coming in at 107 proof, a Brown-Forman product, just like King of Kentucky, just like Old Forester and Woodford Reserve. But in terms of age statement, having 12 years stated on the front of this bottle is a crazy thing. It's super cool to come from Jack Daniel's. And this is one of those companies right now, even though it is a legacy distillery, they've been around forever. It's one of those companies that is continuing to, I don't wanna say reinvent the wheel, because they're not reinventing anything. They're just aging their whiskey longer and putting an age statement on it. But the fact that they're taking this step, doing fairly large releases of these special products, and keeping the price relatively reasonable. I don't know what this is. I wanna say off the top of my head, 80 bucks. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. I should have looked that up before this video. But I feel like Jack Daniel's is doing everything right in this case, and it's really exciting to see that. Let's go ahead and check this thing out on the nose and see what we get. All right, so I can see why I would have said that this, at least, you know, to my memory, compares to King of Kentucky. It has that really rich, kind of concentrated, intense molasses note that I get from aged Brown-Forman / particularly Old Forester products, which is where we are usually able to taste highly aged Brown-Forman stuff, is in that Old Forester portfolio, President's Choice, King of Kentucky, etc. That kind of concentrated molasses note is something that I typically get from an aged Brown-Forman product. It is in here, and that's why I thought King of Kentucky at first. But along with that molasses note, there's actually something in here that reminds me of kind of an aged Barton product. When we talk about aged Barton, whether it's like Sam Houston or Calumet, 1792 12-year, those products have kind of this medicinal cherry cola, or maybe cherry Dr. Pepper is what I typically refer to it as, but this kind of medicinal cherry note in there. This Jack 12 does have a little bit of that going on, and I think that comparison is fair, like a cherry Dr. Pepper kind of note. But remember that we are talking about Jack Daniel's here, and when we talk about that, you cannot forget the Jack Daniel's banana note. That is absolutely present in this whiskey right now. It's not overwhelming, it's not too bright or candied. That can sometimes get on people's nerves, me included. It integrates well within the whiskey, and so I think it, whether it adds or subtracts, that's a subjective thing. But in the case of like pure objective, you know, whiskey construction, that's like the nerdiest thing I've ever said. I don't think it's a problem here. I think it's fine. It just adds another layer, another dimension. So we have this deep, dark, rich, kind of sticky molasses thing going on in here. We have the Barton influenced you know, cherry cola, slightly medicinal cherry thing. We have the Jack Daniel's banana, and then there's also a little bit of like an almond note in here, maybe a roasted almond or you know, Spanish almond. I don't know exactly what those are called. Maybe it's just Spanish almond. Something you would get at like a tapas place. Those kinds of almonds. There's a little bit of that nuttiness in here, which I guess I don't typically find that on Jack Daniel's products, but maybe I'm crazy. And last but not least, a bit of coffee in the background, kind of a coffee espresso bitterness. I've said this maybe on recent reviews of other products as well, but it seems to me that a lot of whiskeys right now that I'm tasting kind of have this note in the background, this slightly bitter, either dark chocolate, coffee, or espresso, however you want to interpret that kind of a note. We do get that in here. There's a nice little bit of a pepper spice in this as well. Overall, just a fantastic nose on this whiskey. It's extremely rich, extremely concentrated, and it makes you just want to taste it, so that's what we're gonna do right now. Cheers. That is just a really, really solid whiskey. It's got a great kind of combination of sweet, spicy, tart, and a little bit bitter in there as well. So it kind of covers all of the bases that you would want a whiskey like this to cover. Very, very sweet up front. Actually, a beautiful vanilla note that's coming out of this whiskey that I did not recognize on the nose up to this point. This thing moves through the palate very well. Great development. I would say it's a long finish at 107 proof. Keep that in mind. It's not like a mind-numbingly or tongue-numbing type finish where it's just pepper all the way. It's not high enough proof for that, but at 107 proof, keeping it in perspective, super solid from front to back. Let's go in for a second sip. This whiskey, I would say, stands out in terms of that kind of medicinal cherry note. And it's not like, it's not bad. When you say medicinal cherry, some people think, oh, I don't know about that. The medicinal aspect, what does that add? It adds extra tartness and it adds a little bit of a bitterness, all right? Because this whiskey has other qualities that are in that bitter range on the darker end. I said chocolate, espresso, dark chocolate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's some of that going on in here, and so the medicinal cherry aspect just kind of adds another layer to that. And also on the tart side of things, it plays in very nicely, not only with its own cherry note in the medicinal cherry quality, but it also plays in very well with like the banana note and some of the other stuff in this whiskey. So I don't think the medicinal aspect is a problem. I think it's kind of what makes this whiskey very nice. But underpinning all of that, and maybe the coolest part of this whiskey, is that aged Brown-Forman molasses note. I love this stuff. I think it's ridiculously good whiskey. As I sip it more, my mind goes away from King of Kentucky. Like there's some influence, but maybe not as much as I initially thought. We will check it out in just a second, but I do want to do one final sip of Jack 12 by itself before we get into that. The oak note in this as well. I should have mentioned that earlier, but it kind of hides itself. It's like sweet. It's also a little bit, a little bit savory, bitter oak, a little leathery type of oak, which I think is kind of a savory quality. The oak in the background until I get used to it on the palate, then it starts to bring itself to the forefront. Just awesome, awesome whiskey. But now is the moment of truth. Gotta check this out next to a very small pour of King of Kentucky because I don't have very much left in this bottle. All right, so I'm gonna nose this very quickly, give it a taste, and see if it has any resemblance to this Jack 12 or if I'm just full of crap. I don't know, here we go. The nose is very close. I'm gonna tell you that right now. Yeah, the King of Kentucky does not have that banana note. And that makes sense. This is Jack Daniel's, okay? Jack Daniel's is very strong banana pretty much at all times. It doesn't have the banana note, and there's also something in the Jack Daniel's that's kind of like yeasty. I pick this up sometimes on younger Old Forester products as well. It's a little bit of like this granular, yeasty type smell. The King of Kentucky does not have that either. Those notes do come off younger, the banana and that yeastiness. They make the Jack feel younger. The Jack is younger, only by a couple years, but it is younger. The King of Kentucky is not only a little bit older, but it's also just an exceptional whiskey. It's exceptional single barrels. This release is insane. There's a reason it's so sought after, so allocated, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not upset by these differences one bit. And that molasses note that I talked about on the Jack Daniel's and that I always recognize here, it's the same molasses note between the two. So that relationship is completely intact. I will stand by that. The other thing in the King of Kentucky that I'm picking up on that I should have mentioned on the Jack Daniel's, a small acetone kind of note. And I want to give credit where credit is due on acetone and whiskey, particularly in Brown-Forman whiskeys. Jason from the Mash and Drum. Jason is the one who first, for me, I first saw him talking about acetone notes in whiskey, and he specifically referred to Brown-Forman products. These both have it. Some older, Michter's 10 years have a little bit of that, so I don't know what's going on there, if there was any sourcing. not for me to speculate on in this video, but let's taste this King of Kentucky now and see what this final comparison looks like. There's a reason that's the king, you know? What a ridiculously good whiskey. It reminds me of being in Colorado, and I have no flavor notes to back up why I'm saying that. It just reminds me of being at like a state park in Colorado. It's just so earthy, outdoorsy. I don't know. Yeah, makes me want to go out west or something. One final sip of Jack 12 now. And there we go. More medicinal cherry, that little bit of younger banana yeast thing in there too. But there's a definite relationship here. And what I want to say at the end of this video is that for those of you who will never have the opportunity to own one of these Kings of Kentucky, I don't blame you. Like, most people should not have the opportunity to own this because it's so limited. A few thousand bottles every year. Secondary prices are exorbitant, and the only reason I have this is because I paid way too much money for this bottle. The point is, this is as close to King of Kentucky as I think you can get without having a President's Choice, which is nearly as rare as King of Kentucky because it's just so hard to get your hands on that as well. About half the price on secondary, but still ridiculously rare. This Jack 12 is as close as you're gonna get. The fact that the availability of this is not great, but is not, it's not unicorn tiers. Find one of these. I would pay up to $200 for my first one. If you're gonna buy a couple, being at about $150 would be great at the upper end of the spectrum. I don't love that I paid $250 for it, but it's really good whiskey. I mean, it's like A- or A level whiskey. Some of the best stuff that's been released this year. If you have the opportunity to get your hands on one of these things, it is fantastic. That's gonna do it for this review. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you thought of this. Let me know what you think about Jack 12. Let me know what you think of King of Kentucky and if these things compare, if you've had the opportunity to taste them both. Otherwise, I'm out of here. I'm gonna wrap it up with a little pour of King of Kentucky. Cheers, and I'll see you guys next time here on Drums and Drams.